Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AEC's podcast, Shapemakers. Before we dive into this week's episode, make sure that you're signed up for the Aluminum Extrusion's Technical Seminar and Exposition, also known as ET, April 30th through May 2nd, 2024, at the Rosen Shingle Creek in Orlando, Florida. Make your travel plans now. Join the aluminum extrusion industry's professionals from over 50 countries. Do not hesitate any longer. Grab your tickets at et24.us. And now to our episode of Shapemakers.
Hi, I am Lynn Brown, and I'm a consultant to the Aluminum Extruders Council. And I want to welcome you to our podcast on extrusion and decarbonization. This will be the first of an anticipated 5 podcasts that will address decarbonization and the steps that the extrusion industry is taking to significantly reduce our global warming potential, also to document our global warming potential. I'm joined today by Shane Tredup, President of Custom Aluminum Products in Chicago and Chair of AEC's Sustainability Team. Shane, could you tell us a little bit about custom and the kind of questions regarding emissions and decarbonization that you're hearing from your customers?
Sure. Thank you, Lynn. So Custom Aluminum Products is a privately held extruder, as Lynn was saying, in the Chicago area. We focus in extrusion, fabrication, painting, and anodize. The company is approximately 65 years in business this year. And over the last, say, 12 to 18 months, we have definitely seen a tremendous increase in inquiries around carbon footprint. And, you know, as Lynn and I'll cover a little more, there's a lot of different angles in which, you know, these inquiries are coming to not only Custom Aluminum, but to many extruders. For us, a lot of our inquiries are coming from customers that are stating a global carbon reduction goal and are looking to have their extruders identify first what their carbon global warming potential or their carbon output really is, so that a line in the sand could be made so that reduction could be achieved through decisions made on future products and services.
Yeah, I think we're hearing much the same thing from a growing list of our members. Their customers could be asking what their carbon footprint is, what their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are, what their decarbonization plans are, or something similar. But you drill into it, and at the end of the day, they're also saying, okay, we have corporate mandates at our companies to reduce our carbon footprint. And we expect you extruders, our suppliers, to help us do that. And so we're going to be asking you what your plans are. We're going to ask for progress here. Not a surprise. I mean, you know, aluminum has always been known as carbon intensive. For example, it's the 3rd largest source of embodied carbon for construction, trailing concrete and steel. Admittedly, we trail by a long ways. That's good. Aluminum accounts for about 7% of the embodied carbon, but that compares to 50% for concrete and 35% or so for steel, but we're still number 3 on that list. And the building and construction market is one really where we've first seen the pressure for carbon reduction, and probably the most advanced approaches at present. Just as one example, GSA, which is our government purchasing arm and the largest U.S. landlord, currently has a test program with 11 projects where funding from last year's Inflation Reduction Act is available when low carbon concrete, asphalt, steel, or glass is used. GSA has identified the level of global warming potential emissions, i.e. CO2 equivalents, that represents the 20th best percentile, the 40th best percentile, and the mid-range for a series of products. And to get preferential purchasing and additional funding, you need to be in the best 20th percentile. If nobody is, they'll go to the best 40th percentile. And if no one there, you know, you've got to be better than mid-range. No funding is going to be provided for products below mid-range. And of course, they're asking for documentation of that. Just for example, for steel rebar, you must be under 770 kilos of CO2 equivalents to be in the best 20th percentile, below 887 to be best 40th, and below 1030 to be at midpoint. We see the same approach being taken for major state projects in California and Colorado and an increasing number of states. And while aluminum is not yet on that list, we know from conversations we've had with GSA, we're probably going to be in the next tranche. If we look at the automotive market, again, we see carbon neutrality targets from lots of the OEMs. GM, Mercedes, Jaguar, Land Rover are all targeting carbon neutrality by 2040. Ford, Audi, Toyota, VW by 2050. And again, they've made it very clear that they expect their suppliers, including those producing extrusion-based parts, to help them get there. So what does this mean for aluminum extrusion? Well, first it means that extruders have to understand and document their carbon footprint. And then we'll have to develop plans to reduce it. So yeah, just to start with a little bit of data, we completed an extrusion industry environmental product declaration in 2022. There were 8 extruders that participate. Collectively, they operate close to 30 extrusion facilities and represent close to 40% of North American extrusion output. And the results show that for mill finish extrusion, slightly over 75% of the global warming potential is attributable to the raw material. Put differently, all that goes on in the extrusion plant itself, extruding, cooling, heat treating, represents less than a quarter of our carbon footprint. Recognize that's a snapshot. It's a snapshot of the industry in 2021, which was the data year, and was based on the raw material usage in that year. 47% prime, 53% scrap. Also recognize that 1/4 plant, 3/4 raw material impact on global warming potential was for mill finish. But the numbers don't much change if you look at painted or anodized product. Shane, I know that you've used some of the data with your customers. Has that been helpful?
Well, I would say it's a good beginning of a discussion when we start talking to customers about carbon intensity of aluminum. However, the need that I believe, regardless of the industry that's asking for it, as you were talking, obviously automotive and GSA are big, what I'll call larger entities that are out there talking about this. The industry averages are really not useful enough to be able to state your company's carbon intensity. As you had indicated, knowing that the vast majority of your carbon intensity has to do with billet selection, and many extruders have many choices of how and where they're buying their billet from, the averages are not generally enough clarity for our customers to accept that. So what we have at Custom Aluminum elected to do is to generate our own global warming potential data based on Custom Aluminum's inputs and our processes. So that analysis, I would call it a bit of a sensitivity analysis to say, well, not only what is Custom Aluminum doing and where are we at? It is helpful to use that as a comparison to the industry number to see where we fall in the industry. But as it relates to going to our customers, that's really the only amount of data that they're going to accept, is something that is very, what I'll call site-specific data. They're really looking for product-specific data. And for my view, and I believe the view of what we're discussing in the sustainability committee, is product data really is more of a process data, an extruded mill finish part, an extruded fabricated painted part, things of those iterations, not part number ABC 1, 2, 3. because that granularity is very difficult to differentiate. But what I found very quickly is the amount of work it takes to do this venture on your own it's a tremendous amount of resources to figure out, well, what are we trying to get? How are we trying to get this information together? And then communicate that with someone. And then, the back and forth. It takes many, many months, and it takes a tremendous amount of cost, not only in time, but in actual cost that you're paying for the person who is doing that life cycle analysis for you. So, that's been our kind of experience as we've begun down a more site-specific EPD or global warming potential data.
Yeah, I think that's we've seen the same thing when we did the industry average EPD. It's a lot of months, it's a lot of dollars, and then in today's environment, somebody says, well, can you show us what the numbers would be if we used a lot of low carbon prime and a high level of scrap in the billet? Well, that's not in the average. And, you just can't start all over and say, sure, we'll tell you that. Give me a call in about 5 months and we'll have an answer for you. So we concluded that there had to be a better way to do this, a way that would give our members a lot more flexibility in how they analyzed, tweaked, performed sensitivity analysis on their data. So, Shane, could you give our listeners an overview of where we're headed?
Sure. Well, I first want to comment on what you were saying is you're exactly right. All of those things are true. And what's important and why I want to talk about the tool that we're creating is that this process is costly, both in time and capital. And, there are a number of extruders throughout North America and that are members of the AEC of varying size and resources. And, one of the things the AEC has always done is it's about lifting, the whole boat together. When one of us succeed, we all should succeed, and that we're all trying to drive aluminum use. And so, to somewhat make this a level playing field and getting out the carbon story correctly, I feel that the AEC is really doing the right thing by saying, hey, we're going to do this as an industry so that way, all extruders that want to participate in this can do their part by participating in this survey and inputting their data so that they can get this. So what we've put together on the sustainability team is a industry tool. It's going to be a tool that all extruders that are members of the AEC can use. And what's the thing about this is it allows us to quickly generate carbon data for our customers. Because you're exactly right, Lynn. You draw that line in the sand, which is absolutely critical. The number that you start with is the most important part. But the minute you specify a number, whatever that number ends up being, is literally the next sentence that your customer will ask you is, okay, how do we reduce it by 20%? And without a simple tool that an extruder could use, that becomes very lengthy and costly to do. So it will, I think, also disincentivize people that are selling extrusions against competitive materials to be able to maybe go out and win those jobs if they can't quickly show the carbon reduction needs that not the extrusion industry, but our customers' industries are looking for. So what we've done is we've designed this tool that will be an online tool. And what was really important when we started talking about this is, and we're not going to get into a lot of depth of the difference in these two, but there are two methodologies out there. There's the ISO methods and the EN methods, which is more of a North American standard and a European standard. And there will be a future podcast where we'll talk a lot more about the differentiations of those two standards. But we acknowledge that those standards are both out there, and we need to be able to publish data using those two industry acceptable methodologies. So this tool will do that. This tool will also be able to cover multiple products. So if an extruder is purely just a long length mill finish extruder, this tool works for them. If they're a company maybe more like Custom Aluminum that not only extrudes but fabricates, paints, and anodizes, that an extruder like that could do it. Also, extruders that are casting at their own facilities, either whether it's their own scrap or also casting, buying scrap and casting that into billet as well. This tool will allow for those extruders to calculate their carbon data with that piece. So it's really kind of a build your own recipe, but it is audited and built around accepted and verified calculations. We'll also be able to have a partial breakdown of scope 1, 2, and 3, which I would imagine will also cover a little bit more of those scope things potentially in future podcasts as well. But those are things that customers will ask is, what are your scope 1, your scope 2, your scope 3 emissions? And then also the probably the bigger part is once all that's done and you've got your number is your sensitivity analysis, or the what if I change this feedstock? What if I change this, part of my operation? If I change, maybe I'm going to make a commitment to buy renewable energy instead of, say, a coal-based energy. How does that affect my number? And before you make those investments or those changes to your business, you can do a what if analysis. And you can do that literally real time for what I'll call an unverified number. And if you like where you're at, then you can provide that information to a third party. They can validate that all the numbers, inputted are correct and accurate. And then you can have an audited report that you could give to your customer and say, well, this is what we're going to do for you, and here's how we're going to accomplish it. So that's the overview of the tool.
Well, that's terrific, and it sounds like when this is all done, and we're on track to have it available to our members by mid-year.
Yes.
That it's going to be a really useful tool for extruders to kind of first of all understand their own situation and what they can do to improve their carbon intensity, and particularly to make the more granular information available that we're seeing customers demand. So
I agree.
and as you said, we could do a separate podcast strictly on the tool and some of the functionality that's been built into that, and more on how it can best be used. So we'll do that in the future. We'll also discuss some of the new guidelines for granularity in reporting, what the metal producers are doing to reduce their carbon footprints, because that all comes back to the raw material feedstocks that we're using, and how aluminum extrusions really represent the circular economy. So lots of interesting stuff to talk about over the next couple months. So keep an eye out for our next podcast.
Thank you, Lynn.